My husband kept encouraging me to take sleeping pills, said I needed rest. When I pretended to, I overheard him telling his mistress that soon he'd be rich. Moments later, he transferred a huge sum from our joint account into a secret one under her name. I knew I had to escape and fast. The life I had carefully built with Daniel was everything I had ever dreamed of. We had the house, the small but cozy neighborhood, and the kind of life most people envy from the outside. To everyone else, we were the perfect couple, successful, in love, and completely in sync. But as I stood at the counter of my boutique one quiet afternoon, watching customers browse through my latest collection, a gnawing sensation settled in my chest. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Daniel and I had been together for over 7 years. He was my rock, the man I had trusted with my heart and everything I had worked for. I had my own business, a successful boutique that I had started from scratch, pouring my heart into every piece of fabric, every stitch, every design. Daniel had always supported me in ways I hadn't expected when we first met. His small desk job in a local office was stable, and though not glamorous, it helped us maintain a comfortable lifestyle. He was a steady presence in my life, someone I could depend on, or so I thought. Lately, I had been feeling an overwhelming sense of exhaustion, one that no amount of sleep or tea could fix. I would wake up each morning feeling like I had never truly rested, the weight of the world hanging heavy on my shoulders. It wasn't just the long hours spent running the boutique. It was something deeper, something that felt like it was sapping the very life out of me. I found myself falling asleep at odd hours, fighting to stay awake, struggling to keep my focus. Even in the middle of the day when I should have been full of energy, I felt sluggish and weak. At first I brushed it off. It must be the stress, I told myself. I had a lot on my plate. Running a business, managing the finances, and trying to keep our personal life intact. But as the days turned into weeks and the exhaustion didn't fade, I began to wonder if something more was at play. My body felt as though it was betraying me, and I couldn't understand why. I went to the doctor, who assured me that everything seemed normal. Jesse said, maybe I was overworked. He suggested I try to relax more and get a good night's sleep. But even when I followed his advice, I felt no better. Daniel had noticed too. He was always the first to point out when I was looking a little too tired or when I seemed off. He'd make concerned comments, his voice always tinged with care, and I would brush him off. I'm fine really. Just a little tired, I would tell him. But he didn't let it go. One night he suggested I take something to help me sleep better. You need rest, Amelia, he said, his voice warm with concern. I can't stand seeing you this way. Maybe some sleeping pills would help. I hesitated. I didn't want to rely on pills, especially after hearing so many people talk about the dangers of becoming dependent on them. But Daniel insisted. It's just to help you sleep. You'll feel better after a good night's rest. He was persuasive as always, his soft-spoken tone making it difficult to argue. I knew he wanted the best for me, and so, reluctantly, I agreed. The pills weren't something I had ever considered before, but if they would help me sleep, then maybe they weren't such a bad idea. However, as the weeks went by, I began to notice a strange shift in Daniel. He seemed more insistent than ever, pushing me to take the pills even when I said I didn't need them. You need to rest, Amelia. You can't keep going like this. His words were coded in concern, but something about the way he said them didn't sit right with me. There was an urgency in his tone that made me uneasy. One night, after a particularly exhausting day at the boutique, I decided to try something different. I wasn't feeling any better, and Daniel's constant urging was starting to grate on my nerves. He made my tea as he usually did and placed a small pill by my mug. Take it, he said softly. It's for your own good. I hesitated but nodded, slipping the pill into my mouth. But as I sat there watching the steam rise from my cup, a thought crossed my mind. What if the pill wasn't just about sleep? What if there was something more behind Daniel's insistence? I wasn't paranoid, but my growing exhaustion had left me feeling vulnerable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That night I decided I would test him. I pretended to take the pill but actually held it under my tongue. As I sipped my tea, Daniel sat across from me, watching me with a smile that seemed almost too perfect. After a while I excused myself, claiming I was tired. I didn't want to raise any suspicion. As I lay in bed I tried to sleep, but the tension in the room kept me awake. It wasn't just the pills. It was something deeper, something I couldn't understand yet. I lay there, my mind racing, trying to piece together what had been happening. My thoughts wandered to Daniel and how he had been so persistent about me taking the pills. Why was he so adamant? Why did he need me to rest so badly? Later that evening, after I thought he had gone to bed, I heard the faint sound of Daniel's voice. He was on the phone in the living room speaking in hushed tones. At first I thought nothing of it, but as I strained to listen, I realized that the conversation was something entirely different. Daniel was speaking to someone. A woman. And the words he spoke chilled me to my core. "I'll be rich soon," he said, his voice low and confident. "I've got everything in place. Just wait. Once it all comes together, everything will be perfect. The money is already in the account. I'll be set for life." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Rich? What was he talking about? And who was he speaking to? I held my breath as the conversation continued. He didn't mention me, not once. His tone was filled with excitement, and I could tell from the way he spoke that he was planning something big, something I wasn't a part of. As the conversation ended, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Something wasn't right. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. I couldn't sleep. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with tension. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I had just overheard. Daniel's actions, the pills, his constant insistence, the secretive phone call, it all pointed to something sinister. I had to know the truth. And I had to know now. That was the moment everything changed. I had been living in the illusion of perfection, but the cracks were starting to show. And as I lay there in the darkness, I knew I had to uncover what was truly happening. What had Daniel been hiding from me? And why was he so desperate for me to sleep? The answers were out there. And I was determined to find them. The silence in the house that night felt suffocating, as though every breath I took was weighed down by the uncertainty of what I had just overheard. I had pretended to sleep, but now I was wide awake, my heart racing as my mind replayed the conversation I had just heard. The words "rich" and "everything will come together" echoed in my ears like a haunting refrain. Who was he talking to? What was he planning? Daniel had always been the dependable one. At least that's what I had believed. His small job, while not glamorous, had always been something I could respect. He was content in his routine just as I was content with the life we had built. We had our ups and downs, of course, but nothing I couldn't handle. Now everything felt tainted. The facade of our perfect marriage was cracking, and I wasn't sure if I could trust what was real anymore. I couldn't sleep, not with the weight of the discovery pressing against me. The ticking of the clock on the wall became the loudest sound in the room as I lay there, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The pills. Daniel's insistence. The conversation. It all came rushing back, piecing together in a way that made my stomach churn. What if I had been wrong all along? What if his concern for my well-being wasn't concern at all? What if it was something much darker? I could feel the tension in my body, a knot in my chest that refused to loosen. I had to know more. I needed answers, but I was afraid. What if I was jumping to conclusions? What if there was a simple explanation for all of this? The rational part of my mind told me to wait, to think things through. But the anxiety in my stomach screamed otherwise. I couldn't just lie here pretending everything was okay. Not anymore. The next day I kept up the appearance of normalcy. I went through the motions of our daily routine, greeted Daniel with a smile, and even pretended to enjoy our breakfast together. I didn't want to give anything away, not just yet. But inside I was unraveling. The tension between us felt thicker than ever. As I sat at the table eating my cereal, I noticed Daniel watching me closely. His gaze lingered, but there was no concern in his eyes. He didn't seem worried about me at all. Instead, it was almost as if he was waiting for something, waiting for me to break, perhaps. The thought unsettled me, but I didn't let it show. After breakfast, I retreated to my boutique. I needed space to think, to process everything that had happened. The store was quiet, with only a few customers browsing, their footsteps the only sound breaking the stillness. I walked through the aisles, my hands brushing against the fabric as I tried to focus on the work at hand. But my thoughts kept returning to Daniel, to the conversation I had overheard, to the way he had acted last night. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from me, something big. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. His insistence on the sleeping pills. It wasn't just about helping me sleep. No, it was a way for him to control me, to weaken me. I had been feeling off for weeks, but I had never considered the possibility that he might be behind it. And now, hearing him talk about getting rich, about having plans that didn't include me, the truth was staring me in the face. I had been nothing more than a pawn in his game, a tool for him to use in his pursuit of something more. I felt a rush of anger surge through me, hot and sharp. How could he do this to me? How could he betray me like this? I had built this life for us, worked tirelessly to make our business successful, to give us everything we needed. And he was using it all to fund his secret life, to plan his future with someone else. The thought of it made my blood boil, and yet I couldn't do anything about it. Not yet. That night I watched him again. This time there was no pretending. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let him continue his manipulations. I had to get to the bottom of it. As he made his way to the kitchen, I followed him quietly, my heart pounding in my chest. He opened the cupboard, took out a small bottle of sleeping pills and placed them on the counter next to my glass of water. It was as though he was going through the motions, as though he had done this 1,000 times before. My breath caught in my throat as I watched him with growing suspicion. He didn't notice me standing there, hidden in the shadows, until I cleared my throat. His eyes snapped up, and for a brief moment I saw something in his gaze, something I hadn't seen before. A flicker of surprise, then quickly masked by his usual calm. "I thought you were going to bed," he said, his voice smooth and controlled, but I could hear the slight edge in it. "I'm not tired yet," I replied, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do with the anger bubbling up inside me, but I wasn't going to let him see it. "Not yet." He smiled, that same smile that had once made me feel safe, but now it felt like a mask. "You need to rest, Amelia. You can't keep pushing yourself like this." He reached for the glass of water and added the pill. "Take it. You'll feel better tomorrow." I couldn't take it anymore. The facade, the lies, the manipulation, it was all too much. "I'm not taking it," I said, my voice firm. I wasn't sure what I expected him to do, but it wasn't this. He paused, the smile faltering for just a second. "Amelia, you're exhausted. You need sleep. Why are you being so difficult?" I stood my ground. "Why do you want me to take these pills so badly, Daniel? What's going on?" The tension in the room thickened, and for a moment, it felt like time had frozen. I waited for him to speak, to explain himself, but instead he just stared at me, his face blank, unreadable. I could feel the weight of the silence, the chasm between us growing wider with every passing second. Finally, Daniel broke the silence, his voice lower now, almost soothing. "I'm just trying to help you. I want you to feel better. You've been so tired lately, and it's starting to worry me." But his words didn't reassure me. They only made me more certain that something was off. This wasn't about me. It was about control. I wasn't the woman he had married anymore. I had become a burden to him, something to manage, to fix. And in his mind, the pills were the solution. That night I decided I was done. I couldn't keep living like this, pretending that everything was okay. I had to take control of my own life, and I couldn't do that as long as Daniel had his hold over me. Tomorrow I would start figuring out exactly what was going on. I had to know the truth. The tension between us that night was palpable, like a string pulled too tight, ready to snap. My skin crawled as I sat there watching him, pretending to sip my tea, the pill hidden under my tongue. The sound of the ticking clock in the living room seemed to amplify in the silence. The weight of the lies, the secrets, I could feel them pressing in on me, suffocating me. I had to know more. I had to uncover the truth. When Daniel finally finished his routine of cleaning up and headed to the living room, I waited for a moment. The house felt unnaturally still, like everything was holding its breath. I wasn't sure if I was more afraid of what I might hear or what I might not. But one thing was certain. I couldn't stay in the dark any longer. He had to have been hiding something from me. The unease I had been feeling for weeks, the exhaustion, the pills, it was all too much to ignore now. I waited until I heard his voice on the phone. His tone was casual at first, but there was something about it that didn't sit right with me. I had never been the type to eavesdrop on him. I trusted him, at least I thought I did. But tonight something in me snapped, and I couldn't help it. I had to know if I was just imagining things or if there was something far darker at play. As I silently moved closer, making sure the floorboards didn't betray me, I could hear Daniel speaking to someone in a low, almost conspiratorial tone. It wasn't the casual chatter of someone talking to a friend. This was different. His voice was laced with an energy I didn't recognize. "It's all falling into place," he said. "Once I get the money transferred, we're set. I've got everything lined up. A new life. A new future." I felt my stomach drop. Who was he talking to? And what did he mean by a new life? My pulse quickened as I crouched low behind the wall, trying not to make a sound, every nerve on edge. The more he spoke, the more my heart pounded in my chest, the more everything I had believed about our life began to unravel. Yeah, once it all comes through, I'll be able to take care of everything, he continued, his words floating into the air like a chilling breeze. I'll be able to leave her behind and it won't even matter. She'll never know. The money's almost there. Just one more transfer and we'll be fine. Then we can finally be together, you and me. The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. My legs felt weak beneath me and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Leave her behind? Who was he talking about? Who was she? It couldn't be me, could it? The doubt, the uncertainty, the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I stumbled back, a wave of nausea sweeping over me as I tried to process what I had just heard. I wasn't just his wife. I wasn't just his partner. I was something else. Something disposable, something that could be cast aside. The thought tore through me and I had to fight back the urge to scream. My mind was racing, trying to piece together the fragments of what I had just learned. What was Daniel planning? Why hadn't I seen it before? Why hadn't I noticed the signs? I had to know more. I couldn't just walk away from this without answers. I had to hear the rest of the conversation. But my heart was pounding too loudly in my ears and I was paralyzed with shock. The man I had trusted with my life was planning a future without me. And worse, he was planning it with someone else. The sound of the phone call continued, but my focus was on the words that now seemed to echo in my head. Money. The future. A life without me. It all began to form a picture in my mind, one that I had been too blind to see before. The pills, the insistence on me taking them, his sudden need for me to rest. It wasn't for my health. It was all part of a plan. A plan to break me down, to make me weak enough that I wouldn't see the truth, to distract me from what he was doing behind my back. I slowly made my way back to the bedroom, my mind spinning, my thoughts tangled. The air felt thick with tension, every movement feeling like a betrayal. How had I let myself become so blind? How had I trusted him so completely? The man I had built a life with, the man I had loved, was turning out to be someone I didn't even recognize. Someone I was no longer sure I could trust. I sat on the edge of the bed trying to steady my breathing. The room felt smaller somehow, suffocating in its silence. The weight of the secret Daniel had been carrying pressed in on me, and I felt like I was drowning in it. The anger swelled inside me, sharp and cold like a knife twisting in my gut. I had trusted him. I had given him everything. And he was throwing it all away for some other life, some other woman. The betrayal was almost too much to bear. I couldn't sit here anymore. I had to act. I had to find out everything. I had to see the proof and I had to do it now. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The world outside seemed to go on as normal, but inside I was fighting a battle. I couldn't just ignore the truth anymore. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine. Daniel had left for work. His usual routine, as if nothing had changed, as if he hadn't just planned a life without me. I didn't waste any time. I started searching through his things, his emails, his phone, anything I could find. I had to uncover the full extent of the lies, the betrayals. And when I opened the email inbox, my hands shook as I clicked through the messages. There were transfers, money moving between accounts. There were dates and names that weren't mine. And then I saw it. A set of messages confirming the transfer of money to an account in someone else's name. It was all there. His plans, his promises to someone else. The life I thought I had was a lie. My heart pounded in my chest as I absorbed the weight of it all. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about his infidelity. It was about control. He had been manipulating me for so long and I had never seen it. Now, as I stared at the evidence, I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't let him keep taking from me. The weight of the evidence in front of me felt like it was crushing me. I had hoped desperately that I had been wrong. Maybe I had misinterpreted the phone call, maybe I was overthinking things, but the truth was right there. The emails, the transfer records, the hidden bank accounts. It was all so clear. Daniel hadn't just been hiding things from me. He had been building an entirely different life, one that didn't include me. One that never did. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the pages of the bank statements, the numbers swimming before my eyes. Each transaction seemed like a knife twisting in my chest, each amount bigger than the last, all flowing to an account under someone else's name, someone I didn't recognize. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how carefully Daniel had constructed his web of lies. It wasn't just about the money, it was about control. He had been managing every part of our lives quietly, skillfully, while I had been blissfully unaware. The realization hit me like a tidal wave, overwhelming and suffocating. For the past several years, I had poured my heart and soul into this relationship. I had supported him, believed in him, helped him build the life we shared. And now I was just a pawn in his game. All the sacrifices, all the love I had given meant nothing. He had been planning his future without me from the very beginning. And I hadn't seen it. I sat there, my mind racing, trying to piece together the puzzle. The pills. The constant urging to sleep. The phone call. The transfers. It all made sense now. Daniel hadn't just been trying to help me rest. He had been trying to control me, to break me down so I wouldn't question what he was doing behind my back. It wasn't about me being tired. It was about making me weak, making me dependent on him. He had been slowly, methodically draining me, physically and emotionally, so that when the time came to leave me I wouldn't even be strong enough to fight back. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of the discovery settle on my shoulders. How had I not seen this sooner? How had I missed all the signs? The subtle shifts in his behavior, the small lies that never seemed to add up. How had I let him get away with it? I had been so wrapped up in the idea of our perfect life that I had ignored the cracks that had been forming all along. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream, to throw everything in his face and demand answers. But the anger that bubbled inside me wasn't just for the lies. It was for the way he had betrayed me. For the way he had used me, manipulated me while I thought I was building a life with someone I loved. The hurt felt like a physical blow, a sharp, piercing pain that I couldn't escape from. But as I sat there staring at the screen, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just sit here and let him destroy me. I couldn't let him get away with this. I had spent too long being the dutiful wife, too long trusting him without question. Now it was time to take control. I closed my laptop and stood up, my legs shaky beneath me. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let him continue his charade any longer. I was done being the victim in his game. I had to find a way out. The house felt different now, like it was closing in on me. Every corner seemed to hold a memory of him, every room a reminder of the lies. It was as though I was suffocating in the life we had built. I had no idea how I had gotten here, how I had allowed myself to be trapped in this toxic web. But now I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to break free. The hours passed in a blur as I tried to think through my options. I couldn't confront him yet, not until I had everything I needed. I had to make sure I had the upper hand. I couldn't let him twist this into something I couldn't control. I had to think carefully, methodically, like he had done. I would gather the rest of the evidence. I would expose him for what he really was. A liar, a manipulator, a coward. And when the time came, I would make sure he faced the consequences. I spent the next few days searching through every part of our life together, every nook and cranny where Daniel might have hidden something. The more I uncovered, the more disgusted I became. He had set up multiple accounts, each one siphoning money from our joint savings, moving funds to the other account under his mistress's name. I even found emails between them planning their future together. There were messages about how they would travel the world, how they would live without any worries, how they would start fresh. And in all of those plans I was nowhere to be found. I was nothing more than a stepping stone to him, a way to fund his dream of a life without me. And it wasn't just the money, it was everything. He had used me, manipulated me into thinking I was building a future with him when all along he had been planning his escape. Each piece of evidence I uncovered felt like a weight lifting from my chest, but it also filled me with more anger, more determination. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not after everything he had put me through. Not after everything I had sacrificed. Finally, I had everything I needed. The bank records. The emails. The phone calls. I had proof of his betrayal and I was ready to act. I wasn't going to wait another day. I wasn't going to let him destroy my life any more than he already had. I went to the police the next morning, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea how this would go, what they would say, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stand by and let him ruin me any longer. I walked into the station, my hands clenched into fists, and I gave them everything I had. The evidence. The records. The truth. And when I finished, I looked the officer in the eye and said, I want him arrested. He's been stealing from me. He's been lying to me. And he's been planning to leave me for another woman. I want him to pay for what he's done. The world around me felt like it was slowly starting to spin out of control. After handing over the evidence to the police, a strange calmness had settled in my chest. It wasn't relief, not yet, but something close to it. I could almost hear the ticking of the clock in my head, each second dragging on, knowing that soon I would face Daniel. The man I had once trusted, the one I had built everything with, was now a stranger. A deceitful stranger who had stolen from me, lied to me, and manipulated me for years. I had always known deep down that something wasn't quite right, but now that I had uncovered the full extent of his betrayal, I felt nauseated by the layers of lies I had been forced to swallow. It wasn't just the money, it wasn't just the affair, it was how he had used me. The realization hit me harder than I could have ever expected. Daniel didn't just steal money from me. He had stolen my life, my energy, my trust, my self-worth. I sat in the sterile waiting room of the police station, the harsh fluorescent lights above flickering slightly. There were other people there, waiting for their own matters to be resolved, but I barely noticed them. My mind kept replaying the moments when I had realized what Daniel was truly capable of. The truth was a slow burn, seeping through my veins like poison, and now it was everywhere. He hadn't just been running his little scheme behind my back. He had been orchestrating every part of my life to suit his needs, and I was the one who had been blind to it. The way he had subtly influenced everything, from the pills to the way he would always claim to be doing things for our future, convincing me that I should just trust him. He had made me feel weak, vulnerable, as though I couldn't handle life on my own without his guidance. It was a slow, insidious process, but now it was so glaringly obvious. He didn't just want to control me. He wanted to isolate me, make me dependent on him in every way so that when the time came for him to walk away, I wouldn't have the strength to stop him. I remembered the small things, the moments when I questioned his behavior but brushed it off. How many times had he subtly pushed me into taking the pills when I said I didn't need them? How many times had he told me to take a break, when I was busy, when I didn't want to? There had always been something about those moments that didn't sit right with me, but I had ignored it. The feeling of being pushed, nudged in a direction that didn't feel like my own. But I had trusted him, believed that he only wanted the best for me. Now I knew that had never been the case. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The sleeping pills were just the tip of the iceberg. He had been carefully crafting my life to make me think that I needed him, that I couldn't function without him. He had gotten inside my head, manipulated my emotions, and twisted the way I saw the world. I hadn't just been his wife. I had been his project, someone he could mold into the person he wanted me to be. Every time I hesitated, every time I doubted myself, he would be there, reassuring me that he had the answers, that he was the one who knew what was best. And all along he had been plotting behind my back, lining his pockets, securing his future with someone else. The phone call that I had overheard now made so much more sense. "We'll be rich soon," he had said, like it was some kind of plan. His future wasn't with me, not really. His future was with her, the woman he had been building a life with on the side. And I had been too blind to see it. I had spent my energy trying to please him, trying to make our life together work, and he had been living a completely different reality, one that I wasn't even a part of. As I sat there in the waiting room, the anger bubbled inside me like a volcano ready to erupt. I had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together. But Daniel had systematically torn me apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of the woman I once was. He had taken away my sense of self, my confidence, my ability to trust anyone. And for what? To satisfy his own desires? To fulfill his own plans at the cost of my happiness? I clenched my fists in my lap, the anger giving way to a deep sadness that I couldn't shake. How had it all come to this? How had I allowed myself to be controlled for so long? I thought I knew who Daniel was. I thought I knew what our marriage was built on. But I had been living in a lie. I had built a future with a man who had no intention of ever including me in his plans. The police officer finally called my name, breaking me from my thoughts. I stood up, my legs still shaky from the emotions that had been swirling inside me. My hands trembled slightly as I followed him to a small office in the back. The officer motioned for me to sit, his face serious but kind. "Mrs. Westbrook," he said as he opened a folder in front of him, "we've reviewed the evidence you provided. And based on the information, We can move forward with filing charges against your husband." Hearing him say that was like a punch to the gut. I had spent so many years defending Daniel, making excuses for his behavior, trying to justify things that didn't need justification. But now, hearing the officer confirm that everything I had discovered was real, it hit me like a ton of bricks. "We'll need you to come in and give a full statement once we proceed, but we've already contacted Mr. Westbrook. He'll be brought in for questioning." The officer's voice was steady, professional, but I could hear the slight edge of sympathy in his tone. He could see the toll this was taking on me. I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know what else to say. There was so much to process, so much to come to terms with. But one thing was clear: I couldn't go back. I couldn't unsee what I had learned. I couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. I stood up to leave the office, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. But something inside me had shifted. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, and no matter what happened next, I wouldn't let Daniel, or anyone, take my strength away from me again. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was done living in the shadow of his lies. I was done being his victim. The air in the police station was thick with anticipation, a tension that clung to my skin like sweat. As I walked out of the officer's office, I couldn't shake the feeling of finality. The decision had been made. The ball was in motion now, and everything I had uncovered, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, was out in the open. But as much as I knew I was doing the right thing, a cold knot of fear and uncertainty twisted deep inside me. I had come so far, had dug so deep to unearth the truth, but now that I was standing on the edge of it all, the magnitude of what I had done, the choices I had made, suddenly felt overwhelming. There was no going back. I had exposed Daniel for what he was, but I still didn't know how this would all play out. Would I be able to handle what was coming? Could I really leave everything behind and walk away from the man I once thought I loved? The day dragged on in a blur of numbing thoughts and anxious anticipation. I went back to the house, but it didn't feel like home anymore. The place that once held so many memories now felt hollow, empty, as if it had turned into nothing more than a collection of rooms filled with lies. I walked through the hallways slowly, my fingers grazing the walls as though searching for something to ground me in this new reality. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, as though the house itself was conspiring to keep me trapped. I had spent so many years here, so many years of my life, my dreams, my energy. And now I was watching it all fall apart, the very foundation of my existence crumbling beneath my feet. I thought about how much I had given to this marriage, how I had built everything we had together, only to find out that it had all been a lie. Daniel was still at work, but I knew that when he came home things would be different. I could feel the change in the air already. There was no denying it anymore. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of his deceit. The very thought of facing him, of standing in front of the man who had torn my world apart, filled me with a sense of rage and helplessness. But beneath that anger was something even stronger: determination. I didn't want to live like this anymore. I didn't want to be the woman who stood by, quietly accepting lies and betrayal. I didn't want to be the one who waited in silence, pretending everything was okay while he manipulated me, drained me, and left me with nothing but a hollow shell of who I once was. The truth was, I had been afraid. Afraid of the unknown, afraid of what would happen if I confronted him, if I took that final step toward freedom. But now, I knew that the fear I had been carrying all these years wasn't my own. It was his fear. The fear he had instilled in me, making me believe that I couldn't make it on my own, that I was nothing without him. It wasn't my fear, it was his. And it was time to let it go. I sat on the couch, my hands trembling in my lap as I thought about what I needed to do. I couldn't keep running from this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it was falling apart around me. I had to face him. I had to look him in the eye and confront him about everything. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, about taking back control over everything he had tried to strip away from me. The sound of the front door opening startled me, and I quickly stood up, my pulse quickening. It was him. He was home. I could hear him in the kitchen, rustling through the drawers, his footsteps heavy on the floor. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The moment had arrived. I walked into the kitchen, my heart hammering in my chest, my mind racing with everything I wanted to say. He looked up when he saw me, his face softening into that same smile I had seen a million times before. But this time it didn't comfort me. This time, it only fueled the fire of anger that had been smoldering inside me for so long. "Hey, how was your day?" Daniel asked, his voice laced with the same fake warmth he had used for years. The same warmth that had masked his true intentions. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stood there staring at him. I could feel the weight of everything that had happened, everything I had learned pressing down on me. But I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me with his false kindness, his empty promises. "I know," I said, my voice steady, but every word felt like it was being torn from my chest. "I know everything." His eyes widened, and for a brief moment I saw the mask slip. He recovered quickly, his expression hardening, but it was too late. The truth was already out. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice a little too calm, his eyes darting away from mine. I took a step closer to him, my hands clenched at my sides. "I know about the bank accounts," I said, each word cutting through the air like a knife. "I know about the transfers. I know about her." The blood drained from his face, and for a moment I thought he might collapse right there in front of me. But he quickly regained his composure, his jaw tightening. "This isn't what you think," he said, his voice low and defensive. "You don't understand." But I wasn't listening anymore. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I understand perfectly." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "You've been using me, Daniel. Using me to build your little empire while I've been working myself to the bone. You've been planning your future with someone else, and all the while, I was nothing more than a tool to get you what you wanted." He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, cutting him off. "No more lies. No more excuses." I had never felt so sure of myself. I was done with the lies. I was done with the man who had controlled me, who had used my love against me. "I've already contacted the police," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. "I'm filing charges. And this time you're not getting away with it." His face turned pale, his expression shifting between disbelief and panic. "You can't do this," he said, his voice cracking. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," I said, my voice firm. "You don't get to do this to me anymore. You don't get to destroy everything we had, everything I worked for, just because you want something better for yourself." For the first time in years I felt free. The weight of his manipulation, the weight of the life he had forced me into, had been lifted. And in its place I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: strength. I could hear my heartbeat loud in my ears, matching the rhythm of my thoughts as I stood in front of Daniel. The anger I had bottled up for so long now surged through me, raw and untamed. It wasn't just the anger at the betrayal. It was the years I had spent, blind to the truth, believing in a man who had never truly been on my side. The truth, once buried so deep, was now bubbling to the surface, undeniable. I was done with the lies, done with the manipulation. The police were already on their way. It was time. Daniel was standing there in front of me, but his usual composure had cracked. For the first time I could see the panic in his eyes. He had always been able to control the situation, smooth things over with his words. But now the reality was setting in, and he was out of words. The man I had trusted with my life had no more excuses left. "What do you mean you contacted the police?" Daniel's voice cracked as he took a step back, his hands instinctively reaching for something, anything, to give him a semblance of control. He was used to controlling the narrative, the decisions, but now the story had shifted and he was no longer the one writing it. I felt a strange calmness settle over me, as if I had been holding my breath for years and had finally exhaled. I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't see the man I had married. I saw a stranger. I saw someone who had robbed me of my peace, my trust, my sense of security. And that was no longer something I could ignore. "Yes," I said, my voice steady, though the weight of the words felt immense. "I contacted the police. I have everything: your bank transfers, the emails, the phone call. Everything." His expression shifted, his face flushing with a mix of disbelief and rage. "You don't know what you're doing," he spat, his voice rising. "You can't just destroy everything we've built. This is insane." I shook my head. "No, Daniel. You destroyed everything. You tore apart our life, our marriage. I gave you everything. I supported you. And you—" I stopped myself, the words too much for a moment, a painful weight that I hadn't expected. "You lied to me. For years. And you think I'm the crazy one for finally standing up for myself. He took a step toward me, his hand reaching out, but I stepped back, refusing to let him touch me, refusing to let him invade the small space of safety I had just built. You don't understand, he said, his voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was just trying to fix things. I was trying to give us more. For us. For our future. The words felt hollow. They felt rehearsed. This wasn't about us. This wasn't about our future. This was about his future without me. You don't get to make those decisions anymore, I replied, my voice firm, unwavering. You don't get to decide what happens to me, to my life. Not anymore. There was a moment of silence, thick and heavy. His eyes flickered from anger to confusion, and then finally something I couldn't quite place. Desperation maybe? Or was it just guilt? Whatever it was, it only lasted for a moment before he regained his composure, wiping the emotion from his face like it had never been there. I never wanted to hurt you, Amelia, he said, his tone now defensive, almost rehearsed, like he had practiced this line. This was never about hurting you. It was about making sure we had everything we needed. I never thought you'd find out. You were too busy, too caught up in your work to notice. Too busy. I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. I was too busy trying to build a life with you. I was too busy trusting you. I was too busy believing that you were the man I thought you were. Daniel's expression faltered just for a second, but it was enough. He knew I had seen through him. The truth was undeniable now. He had crossed a line he could never come back from. You don't know what you're doing, he repeated, this time with less conviction. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, but I wasn't moved. I'll lose everything. You don't want to do this. I don't want to do this? I asked, the anger boiling in my chest. You think I wanted to be here? You think I wanted to find out all of this? To discover how much you've lied to me? My voice cracked with the weight of the emotions that were fighting to break free. You think I wanted to feel like I was nothing? Like I was just a means to an end for you? His face darkened, and for the first time I saw the real man behind the mask. The one who wasn't afraid of lying, of betraying, of breaking everything in his path to get what he wanted. But it was too late. I had already seen through him. You'll pay for this, he said, his voice now cold, threatening. You think you can just destroy everything? I'll make sure you regret it. I felt a chill run through me, but this time it wasn't fear. It was clarity. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I wasn't afraid of his threats. He didn't have control over me anymore. And if he thought he could intimidate me, make me feel small, he was gravely mistaken. You've already lost, Daniel, I said, my voice unwavering. You've lost me. You've lost my trust. And now you'll lose everything you've been hiding from the world. It's over. The doorbell rang. The sound pierced through the tension in the room, and we both froze for a moment. The police were here. This was it. The moment I had been building toward. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow, but it was overshadowed by the fact that I was finally taking control of my own life again. I turned toward the door, my heart pounding, knowing that whatever happened next, I couldn't go back. I couldn't let him back into my life. The man who had broken me, used me, betrayed me, he didn't deserve another chance. He didn't deserve anything from me anymore. I opened the door to the officers standing there, their expressions unreadable. One of them stepped forward and introduced himself, confirming that they had come to take Daniel into custody. His eyes flickered with a mixture of panic and defiance, but there was nothing he could do now. The truth had come out, and there was no hiding from it. As the officers moved to arrest him, I stepped back, letting them take control. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. This wasn't about making him feel the pain he had caused me. It was about taking my life back. It was about reclaiming the parts of me he had stolen and moving forward. I'm done, I whispered to myself, the weight of those two words settling over me. I was done. And for the first time in years I felt free. The door clicked shut behind Daniel as the officers escorted him out of the house. I could feel the air shift, a breath of finality. The house was eerily silent, as if it, too, were exhaling the weight of the years I had spent living in its walls. I stared at the empty space where Daniel had stood just moments before, his face a mask of disbelief, anger, and something darker that I hadn't fully understood until now. His presence had been suffocating, and now without him the space felt lighter. I took a deep breath, the first real breath I'd taken in what felt like a lifetime. The weight of the decisions I had made, the years of lies, the broken trust. All of it hung in the air like a thick fog, but for the first time I didn't feel trapped by it. I felt free. Free from the years of uncertainty. Free from the man who had manipulated my life for so long. The relief was overwhelming, but it didn't come without its own sting. I walked through the house slowly, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Each room, once filled with shared memories, now felt foreign. The furniture that had once seemed cozy and warm now stood like remnants of a past I was trying to let go of. The walls, which had witnessed so many quiet moments, now seemed to whisper the truth I had denied for too long. The life I had fought so hard to build with Daniel was a lie, and while I had the courage to walk away from it, the sting of betrayal was still fresh, still raw. I wandered to the kitchen, the heart of our home. The coffee maker sat where it always had, the mugs I used to drink my morning tea in their place. It was almost as if nothing had changed, but everything had. The person I had been, the woman who had poured so much into this marriage, into this house, into this life, was no longer here. I wasn't that woman anymore. And I had no intention of ever being her again. The truth was, I had been lost for so long that I hadn't realized how much I had changed. The life I had lived with Daniel, built on half-truths and deceit, had robbed me of myself. I had been so focused on pleasing him, on making him happy, on maintaining the illusion of our perfect life, that I had neglected my own dreams, my own needs. I had become a shell of who I was, a shadow in my own life. But now, in the wake of his departure, I could feel the weight lifting. I could feel the possibility of something new beginning. I sat at the kitchen table, the silence pressing in around me, but instead of suffocating me, it gave me space to breathe. I let my thoughts settle, the sharp edges of the past gradually dulling with each passing moment. The anger that had burned through me, the fury I had felt as I confronted him, was beginning to cool. And in its place there was something else, something I hadn't expected. There was peace. I reached for the cup of tea that I had poured hours ago, its warmth a small comfort in the emptiness of the room. I sipped it slowly, the gentle taste grounding me. I had spent so many nights drinking tea with Daniel, trying to keep up the appearances of normalcy. But now there was no need for that mask. I could sit here alone and just be. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts, pulling me back to reality. My heart skipped a beat. Who could it be? I stood, moving toward the door with cautious steps, my hand resting on the handle. I wasn't sure what I expected, but when I opened it, I found myself face to face with a stranger. A woman. She was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, dressed in business casual, her expression soft but determined. She smiled warmly at me, but there was a sadness in her eyes that I didn't expect. "Amelia Westbrook?" she asked gently, her voice kind but firm. I nodded, feeling a sudden wave of uncertainty wash over me. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" The woman took a deep breath, her hands folded in front of her. "My name is Charlotte Avery," she said. "I'm Daniel's attorney." I felt a knot tighten in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. The last thing I needed was to get swept up in emotions again. I opened the door wider, stepping back to allow her inside. "Please come in." She entered cautiously, looking around the room as if trying to gauge my mood. I gestured toward the couch and she sat down, her eyes meeting mine with an almost apologetic expression. "I know this isn't easy," she began, her tone sincere. "But I've been working with Daniel for a while now, and I think you deserve to know what's happening." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "He's already been arrested. What could you possibly want from me?" Charlotte hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. She handed it to me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. Sympathy perhaps, but also a certain wariness. "I'm not here to make excuses for Daniel," she said, "but I want you to understand that he's not the man you thought he was. He's made mistakes, huge mistakes, but he's also facing things that you might not be aware of. His financial issues were complicated. And the affair was, well, it's not just about betrayal. There were other things at play here." I took the envelope, my fingers trembling slightly. My heart beat faster in my chest, but I opened it carefully, knowing this was another piece of the puzzle. Inside were papers, documents I couldn't quite decipher at first glance. Legal jargon, contracts, terms I didn't recognize. "Those documents explain some of his financial dealings," Charlotte continued. "He's been in debt for years and things spiraled out of control. But the money he transferred, the things he did to you, it's all part of a much larger situation. He's been trying to fix it in his own way, but it's too late. I glanced at the documents again, trying to process what she was saying. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice steady but confused. Why come here now after everything that's happened? Charlotte's gaze softened, and for the first time, I saw genuine empathy in her eyes. Because I don't think you deserve to walk away with nothing. You've already lost so much, Amelia. I can't undo what he's done, but I can make sure that you get what's fair, what's rightfully yours. I believe you deserve that. Her words sank in slowly, like rain soaking into dry soil. I had been so focused on the pain, on the betrayal, on reclaiming my life that I hadn't stopped to think about what I had lost, and what was still mine. My work, my strength, my independence, and perhaps most importantly, my dignity. I looked at her, a mixture of gratitude and confusion swirling inside me. And what do you suggest? Charlotte leaned forward, her expression now intense, determined. I suggest you fight for what you deserve, Amelia. Fight for the future you've worked for. Not the one Daniel promised, but the one you can create on your own. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something powerful stir inside me. Hope. Real hope, not based on the false promises of a man who never truly saw me. Hope for something better, something mine to build. I'll fight, I said quietly but firmly, the words solidifying in my chest. For everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. I'd love for you to join me on this journey and stay tuned for more. Thank you for being here.